Alright, so we'll say good morning. A lot of beautiful Gemara today. Today's daf is Kuf Mem Dalid 144. We are picking up on Kuf Mem Gimel Amud Beis 143b by the bottom Mishnah. Important Mishnah. Himiach. Person leaves behind Banim Gidolim Uketanim. Person left behind older sons and younger sons. Hishbichu Gidol Masanachasim, Hishbichu Latnos. So we'll say if the older sons, this is before the property itself is divided. So before the estate is divided, the older sons take upon themselves to improve the property. Hishbichu La'emsa. We'll say any shevach, any improvement that is done to undivided estate property, ultimately, again, is divided or is shared by the entire estate. However, in Amru, if the older brothers made the declaration and they said, see what our father has left us, so we'll say, if the brothers essentially make a declaration and they say, we are ready to split the estate, and we're going to make improvements, and whatever improvements we make should come from our share, then what's the halacha? Then we'll say any improvements ultimately, again, belong to the older brothers themselves. Similarly with a woman, I will say we're going to discuss exactly what case this is here. A woman who apparently inherited property and she improves the property. So we'll say this is all talking about improvements that take place pre-division, pre-estate division. So if she goes ahead and she makes improvements to the estate prior to the division, all improvements are shared by all of the inheritors. However, im amra re'uma sheniach li baili. But if she says, see what my husband has left me, in other words, she says, I'm ready to divide the estate, I'd like my portion, harani osev va'ocheles, I will go ahead and improve the estate essentially from my own chelek. Then what? Hishbicha liatzma. Then I will say the improvements to the estate ultimately again belong solely to her. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Chaviva, Amar Rabbi Chaviva, Bereid Rav Yossi, Bereid Rav Mishmei Rava, Lo shanu elo sheshabchu nechasem machmas nechasim. This is very interesting. When do we say that if the estate was improved prior to division, that the improvements are shared by all of the inheritors of the estate? That's only sheshabchu nechasim machmas nechasim. Look at the Rashbam, last three lines. Elo sheshabchu nechasim machmas nechasim. Lo tirchu v'lo tziu mishalahem klum. Ela minichse avian sachru polim v'yishbichu anuchasim. So we'll say, if at the end of the day, the inheritors themselves did not actively work to improve the estate, but instead they took estate money and hired workers to be able to go ahead and improve the estate, if that's how they improved it, then Lamais, again, that's when we say that the improvements are shared by all the inheritors equally. However, but let's say again, the case of the older brothers or the wife, they rolled up their sleeves and they actively did the work. The Rashbam says, "Machmas atzman shechafru v'natu v'sachru mishalahem v'lo mishalaviem or shevach az shevach liatzman." We'll say if they actively improve the estate, and again through their own work and through their own money, then everyone will agree that the shevach, the appreciation of the estate, belongs to the individuals who improved it. Ini, is that so? Top of Kuf Mem Daled, Ella Odaini. Let's say the father only left behind to the Yarshim. The only thing he left behind was a water cistern, a well. And the Rashbam says over here, Odaini is barbiki suyav. It is a pit, a water pit, as well as the covering. V'silchron also lahashkos sados mimeimav. So it says the way you make money of it is you rent it. You rent it out to people who need to use it for irrigation or to need to use it to water their flocks. So let's say the father left behind an Odaini. What happens? So we'll say the halacha is any money generated from the rental of the Odaini is shared by all of the inheritors. This is about before the estate is divided. So the Gemara says, once they have a Odaini, the machmas atzmohu. But one second, they're both saying, how do you improve an Odaini? What do you do with the Odaini? The only way to actually monetize it, I will say, is to stand guard over it. In other words, you have to make sure that people don't just come and take the water. So somebody's got to stand guard over it. So isn't that a case of an improvement that takes place through the efforts of the individual? And what did we just say before? If improvements take place because the Yarshim dipped into the estate, used money and hired workers, so then everybody shares in those improvements. But if the Yoresh himself went ahead and rolled up his sleeves and worked on behalf of the estate to improve it, then what? Then Lamaisa again, that Yoresh gets to keep it. So is this not a case of where the Yoresh himself is working to improve the estate by standing guard over the water cistern? If that's the case, then he should get to keep the profits from that rental himself. To which the Gemara says, Shani Odaini Dlinatirusahu Davida, Vapilu Kitana Nami Matsu Mintirila. To which the Gemara says, listen, the only thing that's needed by the Odani Rabba, so the only work that's necessary is what? Is literally to stand guard over it, and anyone could do that. Even children. In other words, we'll say, the idea is, when we say standing guard, this was not that somebody had to be afraid of armed conflict. This was that people would take advantage of a water cistern if no one was around. But if someone was standing there, if the owner was standing there, whether the owner was an adult or the owner was a child, so the mice again, that would deter any kind of thieves from taking advantage of it. So because there's not really a huge amount of personal effort involved in this, therefore any shavach, any benefit or any appreciation that comes about or any profit is shared by the entire estate. Weiter. So the Gemara says, Amru ru'u ma she'niach abba harein l'nosim va'ochlim ishbichol yatzon. So remember again, the next case in the Mishnah was, but if the brothers say, listen, we're ready to split the estate, and therefore again, we're going to improve it from our own monies, from the estate, or then the halacha is that the appreciation belongs to them and them solely. Rav Safra, Shavik Avuha Zuzi. So we'll say Rav Safra, his father left behind some money. Zuzi means money. Shaklinu, Abad Bu Iska. So what did Rav Safra do? He took the money and he invested in it. I should say not invested in it. He invested it. Look at the Rashbam. It's the first short line of the Rashbam. Abad Bahan Iska. V'chashav le'shevak nechasim. Machmas nechasim. Hoil ve'ein tzarech torach kolkach. Ela liknos v'limkar. So we'll say, so what Rav Safra essentially did is he took the money, he bought merchandise, and what did he do? He bought merchandise at a particular price, and then he sold it for a higher price. Okay, so he made profit, but he made profit ultimately again with estate money. So says the Gemara, Asu achi tavu abedina. So his brothers came along, and they took him to Beis Din, and the brothers said, listen, that shavach, that profit should be shared by all of us. So the Gemara says, so Rava said to them, now remember, Rav Safra felt that Lamaisa, that Rav Safra did this on his own behalf. That was his claim. The brothers claim that this falls into the category of what we call nechasim, shavchu nechasim, machmas nechasim. That there wasn't really a lot of personal effort on behalf of Rav Safra that should warrant the fact that this solely belongs to him. Rather, this is like the first category of appreciation or profit, where essentially, again, there's very little effort on behalf of the Yoresh, and therefore any profits should be shared by the entire estate. So Rava Paskins, Amar Luhu, Rav Safra Gavra Rabu. Rav Safra is a great man, or as well say, great Talmud Chacham. Lo Shavik Girsei V'Tarach Lachrin. Rav Safra is not a businessman. Rav Safra is not a businessman. Therefore, again, Rav Safra would not have taken the estate, the money of the estate, in order to start generating profits for the estate. Rather, the way we understand it is that Rav Safra's intent, Rabbosai, is that when he went ahead and he bought this merchandise, he did it to generate a relatively modest profit in order to what? In order to support himself. But because, again, he's not the kind of person who would take away time from his Torah study for business pursuits, so we assume that when he did so, it was in a very limited capacity to be able to earn some livelihood for himself, but not for the general estate. Look at the Rashbam. Lo shavik gir sevetarach lachrine, ukimisha amar. We'll say, so what does this mean? So Rava suggests that for someone like Rav Safra, it's as if he said, Ukimisha Amar, Re'uma sheniach lanu abba, dami, v'sham inar meha. So we'll say, it's as if Rav Safra said, see what father has left us. I am taking my portion in order to go ahead and do something with it. So we'll say, the halacha is that when one of the children says, I'm ready to divide the estate, give me my portion, because I'd like to invest or do something with it, and he goes forward and actively does something with it, even before the chalukah, any appreciation ultimately belongs to that child. So Rava Paskor, to that Yoresh. So Rava Paskin, that Rav Safra is in that category. V'shamina mehacha, t'chol heicha demanda havu k'mo Rav Safra, afagav lo amar la'atzmi ani osa, kiman da'amar dami, v'heshpiach li'atzmo. So we'll say, the Rashbam says over here, you see from here, that for someone like Rav Safra, isn't he like Rav Safra? Someone who lived his life in the base medrash, and only ventured out in order to go ahead and potentially make some basic profits for his own personal livelihood, to be able to sustain himself, we assume, therefore, that he is not conducting business on behalf of the estate. And the way we view his actions is as if he said, I am ready to divide the estate, I am ready to receive my portion because I'd like to invest my portion. If he then goes ahead and invests something that would be approximate to what his portion would be, and he generates profits from that, those profits ultimately again belong to him and not to the rest of the estate. Next, so if a woman goes ahead, I will say, and what? Says, I'm ready to split the estate, and then invests or does somehow improves the estate, that shevach, that improvement belongs to her. I don't understand. Why does bless you, where would a woman be a Yoresh in this case? In other words, we'll say the halach is that if a man dies and he leaves behind children, so the Maisa again, it's his children who are Yoresh, not the wife. So what's the case over here is of where the wife is Yarshining? Rabbi Yirmiyah, Be'isha Yoreshes. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, okay, the case over here is where a woman is inheriting. So we'll say whatever the Metzias is, the husband left her a chelik of Yerusha, which again, he could, you could easily do that. Again, he would usually employ the mechanism of a pre-death gift, but Lamaisa, again, the point is the wife has Yerusha. The husband set it up that the wife has Yerusha. You know, the Rashbam has a couple of different variations of this, but we don't have to make this complicated. At the end of the day, she's a Yoreshes, so therefore says something amazing. Pshita. So if that's the case, if she's a Yoreshes, I will say, if she has a chelik in the Yerusha, why does the Mishnah feel the need to repeat the same halacha? Or as the Mishnah told me by the brothers, that once one of the brothers says, listen, I am ready to divide the estate, give me my portion so I can invest it, and if even before the chalukah, even before the division, the brother takes his portion, or what could be his portion, invests it, generates profit, that profit belongs to the brother. So why do you have to tell me the same thing by a woman? In other words, it's that once she's a Yoreshes, she has that ability, to which the Gemara says, Ma'udatema, Kevan delav darka lemitrach afagav delo parish kimo de parish dami. So say I might have thought the following, that perhaps because it is not the derech of a woman to go ahead lemitrach, to go to say and venture out to conduct business with the property of the estate, that therefore because once she does it, it's as if she says, I'm doing this for my own gain. I'm doing this for myself. Since it's not common for her to go out and to conduct business with property on behalf of her potential estate property, therefore it's as if she's saying, if I'm going to do this thing which is unnatural to me, ultimately I'm doing it for my own profit. Therefore the Gemara says, no, kamash malon, if she says it, she gets to keep the appreciation, but if she does not say it, then we do not assume it. So remember again, but if she does say, I want my portion of the estate, see what my husband has left me, give me my portion, let me go invest it, and she takes part of the estate property, she appreciates it, right? She improves it, that shevach belongs to her. Pshita, that's obvious. Malatim, what would I have thought? Kevan dishvicha lamilsa the amrikatar yasmi kami yasmi. I would have thought to both say the following: since it is a nice thing for her if people go ahead and start saying, "Look how wonderful this woman is. She's taking care of the Yisomim." I will say, "Now, what do you take care of the Yisomim? Aren't they her kids?" And remember, as we know, not necessarily. Not necessarily. You could easily be talking about a case of where it's his kids, not her kids. So the Maisa, what the Gemara is saying is the following: that it could be an incredible testament to her character if she is viewed as a matriarchal personality towards the Yisomim, even though they're not her children. And therefore I will say, I might have thought that's what? That Lamaisa, therefore achuli achla. I might have thought that even when she goes out and she says, I'm ready to divide the estate, give me my property because I want to improve it, and she goes out and she improves it, maybe she doesn't keep the shevach, maybe she shares the shevach ultimately with who? With the Yisomim, in order that because she gets the covet ultimately again of being known as a nurturing personality. Kamash Malan, no. Kamash Malan, nurturing is good, money's better. Right? So that the idea that the Gemara is saying over here is that Lamaisa, if she says, I'm doing this for myself, she's doing it for herself. She's doing it for herself. So it says the Gemara, Hamasi Isha, this is another fascinating case. So we'll say, so what comes out over here, the take-home message of the Mishnah is the following, is that prior to the division of the estate, if any of the heirs takes unilateral action and goes ahead and improves the estate, and improves the estate, then halacha l'maisa, that improvement is shared by all of the heirs. However, the Gemara qualifies that and says that's only true if, let's say, again, one of the heirs is taking money from the estate, hiring workers to improve the estate. But if one of the heirs literally goes ahead, and let's say the father left the field, and one of the heirs literally rolls up his sleeves and plows the field, then that appreciation will belong to that heir. If he actively himself did the work, then he gets the appreciation, even though this is prior to the division. If, however, again, an heir says, I am ready to divide, I want my portion, and I'm here, and if you don't divide it now, I am hereby taking my something, and I'm going to invest it, or I'm going to improve it, then I will say, once he's made his intention to divide his desire to divide the estate clear, then l'maisa, again, the appreciation belongs to that particular heir. Fine. Says him also, listen to this case. Hamasi Amra Bichanina. Hamasi Ishal no Gadol, Bebayis Kno. We'll say, if you marry off your son in a house, then ultimately, again, the son acquires the house. What's the pshat there? Take a look at the Rashbam. Kino, haben lo sabayis, takana sachamim hi, v'hilchasav lo time kidla kamam seches. So also, listen to this. We're talking about a case over here. We've mentioned this before. And actually, I think this is a great practice, where it was common to make the wedding, to build a home, to make a wedding in. Right? So you built a home to make the wedding, and after the wedding was over, that home was given to the chassan and the kala. So let's say, meaning, imagine for a moment, if instead you take the money that you pay for a wedding, and you put a down payment for a house. And what happens? You go ahead and you make the chassan on the house, which obviously pares down the guest list significantly, right? You make the chasana in the house, and then after everybody goes home, the chassan and kala are in their house. So the Gemara says the following: if a man goes ahead and marries off his son in a house, the son automatically acquires that house. As well said, this is actually amazing. So the Gemara says that, and obviously this is not. If I make the wedding in my house, then obviously I'm not yielding my house to son. But let's say again I have another home, and I make the chasana in that other home. So the halacha is, and we're going to explain the parameters of this, that it's understood that if I'm making the wedding in that home, then what's my intent? To give that home to my son. And I both say, now the incredible novelty over here, the Gemara say, Rabbi Chanina is saying, that home becomes the property of my son, even though what? I've made no formal declaration, right? I have not articulated that intent, nor have we done any level of Kabbalah's kinyan yet. Yet the halacha is, if I make the wedding in that house, it's understood. The halacha says that house becomes the property of my son. Now the Gemara gives the parameters. V'dafka gadol, this is only in the wedding of my firstborn son. Dafka gadol, v'dafka basula, only if the girl who he's marrying is a first marriage or she's a basula. The dafka ishta rishona, and dafka if it's my son's first marriage. The dafka she'esir rishon, and only if he is the first child I am marrying off. So we'll say, so what's going on over here? So meaning again, it's my oldest son, his first marriage, Kala's first marriage, and the first child I'm marrying off. If all of these things come together, then if I make the chasana in a home, the home becomes his. We'll say, what's the pshat? Look at the Rashbam for just a moment. V'dafka gadol, v'bechi haygavna chaviv leitvei, the gamar machner. What's in other words? If you put all of these different parameters together, what do you get? You get ultimately, again, like the maximum simcha for a wedding. In other words, this is my first in every regard. My oldest child, his first marriage, her first marriage, their first child I'm marrying off. So when you put all of this together, the simcha is quite acute, and therefore again, I'm willing to go ahead and give over this house to the chassan and kala. You know, by the time I guess I get to the second child, and I'm making a second chasana, then already again, and I know exactly how much this is going to cost and where this is going to go, and that the expenses don't end after the wedding. Already, so then already again, my simcha is a bit more tempered. And I'm not giving away real estate so quickly. So the Gemara says the following. So pshita. Yichelo bayis aviv bayis valia bayis kan lekan. So let's say that I make the chasana ultimately in a home that also happens to have an upper story apartment. So it's clear that at most what I'm giving over to my son is the home, but not the upper story apartment. What about the Gemara says bayis kana aliyah lo kana bayis v'achsadra mahu? We'll say what happens again if let's say there's a house in an achsadra. So achsadra is like like a gazebo, like an outdoor area. So let's say there's a house and there's an achsadra, like a terraced area. So what's the halacha? Do we automatically say that if I'm giving my son a house, I'm giving him the achsadra as well? Or for that matter, shnei batim zulif nimizu. Or I will say, what happens if I have two homes? Ultimately, again, one inside of the other. Am I giving both of those to my son? Finally, the Rashbam says, it's the first white line, Achsadra, Lifnei Abayis Poskin Lo Bo Chalonos, V'derech Achsadra Nichnasim L'Bayis. It says like a breezeway. Like a breezeway that has windows on both sides. So the shaila is, these are secondary type areas. They service the house, but they're secondary type areas. So do I go ahead, if I give my son the house as his wedding present, am I giving him these other areas as well? To which the Gemara says, Teku. Meisvei, they will say, whenever there's a teku with your children, so it means it becomes theirs, and then it's, like hamotzi mechaver alavaraya. You have to try to prove that it's yours. The default is that they take it, and then maybe you'll get it back. Says Gemara, Meisvei, yichad lo aviv vayis ukleva. So listen to this case. Let's say the father goes ahead and marrying off his son in a home, and furnishes the home. So meaning, not only is it a home, I'm making the chasana, I've furnished the home for the sake of the chasana. So what does the Gemara say? Klei bayis kana, bayis lo kana. So we'll say, now we have a brayso that seems to contradict our ruling. The brayso says, my son acquires the furnishings, but he does not acquire the home. So what's the pshat over here, we'll say? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, kegon shahaya otzro shel aviv munach sham. We'll say this is a different case. The case over here is where the father kept his stuff in this house. In other words, that he made the wedding in the house, but otzar means a storehouse. He used this home for his own stuff. Rashbam says, Otzro b'socho, hilchach bayis lo kana, t'chayvim l'mishtame sha'ab bebayis lo, tzir mecheskasav lo makne yilim no. So what's what the Gemara is introducing us to a new idea. When do we say that a father gives over the house to his son as a wedding present? That's only to say if it's clear that the father is no longer using this for his own needs. But if the father is clearly using it for his own needs, like he keeps his tools in there, he keeps his stuff in there, whatever he keeps in there, then that's clear that what? I'm making the chasana here, but I'm not yielding ownership of this space to you, my son. Nardai Yomri, afilu shufka dioni. So we'll say, so Rabbi Yehuda said, sorry, I just lost the place. Nardai said, that even if you keep a dovecote, there, in other words, a dovecote, I get it's something small, even if you keep a dovecote there, that's demonstrative of the fact that you are retaining ownership over the house. Rabbi Yehuda Rapapi Amri, afilu atzitza daharsana. Even if you go ahead and you keep atzitza daharsana, Rashbam says, kli mali dogim mitugana b'shemen. You keep a pot of fried fish. You keep a pot of fried fish in that house, like you're marking your territory. Right? You keep a pot of fried fish in the house, meaning what you're showing is, I use this space. When the father shows that he uses this space, what he's saying over here is that what? I am not relinquishing ownership to myself. We're making the chasana here, but I'm not giving you this house. Marzutra ansebe lebrei. So we'll say Marzutra married off his son, and what happens? V'tala le sandala. He tied a sandal in the house. In other words, he left his shoes in the house. We'll say, what does it mean when he left his shoes in the house? What was he showing? He was showing his son, I'm using this space. Therefore, again, chasana ends by 10, right? The idea being that he was retaining ownership. He was not yielding it to his son. Ravashi nas lebrei. Ravashi married off his son. V'tala le ashisha de mashcha. And he went ahead, Rashbam says, he left ashisha de mashcha kos male shemen. A cup filled with frost. So Rose said, I guess the derech would have been, if you were yielding this property to your son, what you would do is you would vacate the premises. You would meaning you would take out any non-wedding essential items. The fact that these individuals left their stuff in there, whether it's a sandal, a pot of fried fish, a cup of oil, whatever it might be, the point is it's demonstrative of the fact that I'm utilizing this space. If I'm utilizing this space, then I'm not ceding it to you, my son. This is actually very interesting. Marzutra said, these three things the rabbis have made like a halacha without a reason. I will say, Hilchas Sabalotaima means like a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. What happens when you learn halacha l'Moshe Misinai? I will say, there's one thing that we know not to do when it comes to halacha l'Moshe Misinai is ask why. Because halachas l'Moshe Misinai are usually exactly that. They're statements that Hakadosh Baruch Hu gave to Moshe Rabbeinu that have been passed down to the generation that were not given with any accompanying explanation. They just are what they are. So the Gemara says, these three dinei d'Rabbanan, these three interests of rabbinic laws, were essentially made like a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. What are they? I will say chada ha. So I'll say one. So one of these things is what we just said. Rashi says over here, Hamasi isha lebno v'takanas chachami. So we'll say this idea that if I marry off my son in a house, assuming that now, based on what we learned, again, it's my firstborn son, it's the first chasana I'm making, it's his first marriage, it's her first marriage, and I've cleaned everything out of the house, my stuff's not there, I give over the house to my son. I will say, if you think about it again, that does not make sense. It meaning that seems to fly against all of the transactional law that we have ever learned. So Chazal instituted this, and they made it like halacha l'Moshe Sinai, meaning that it works. It works. Now, why is this? This is actually very interesting. The Rashbam says chadahi. If you look at the Rashbam, chadaha hamasi isha libno v'takanas ki lichvod hachasan. Chazal instituted this for the covet of the chasan. Shegnai hadavar la seis isha ve'in makom la dorbo. This is actually quite beautiful because it would be a terrible gnai, terribly embarrassing for the chasan to get married and not have a house to live in. As I will say, that part of the yesod of marriage is not part of the yesod. A major yesod in marriage is the ability of a husband to provide for his wife. It's a din also. It's a din in building healthy self-confidence as well. The ability to provide for one's wife. Therefore, I'm sorry. Siksuk, correct. And therefore, again, the notion of a chasan not having a home of his own after the chasana is something that is very disparaging. Therefore, again, we understand that a father wants his son to be secure. A father wants his son ultimately, again, to start off the marriage on the right step. And therefore, it's understood that the father, if he's making the chasana on this home, and again, with all the other caveats, he's clear out his stuff, that he wants to yield this to his son. So the Gemara goes weiter. Idach, what's the next thing? What's the second halacha that Chazal said? That it just is the way it is because that's what they said, making it halacha l'Moshe Sinai. We learned this part that if a man writes all of his property to his wife, he doesn't mean to actually yield to her the title over the property. Rather, he means to what? Make her the apotropis, make her the executor of the estate. And the Rashbam says, apotropa, da'anan sahadi d'lo akar nachlas habanim, v'lonos kavit nelashi yechabdu habanim mito sha'ochlan al yada. Because we know that a father would not want to disinherit his sons, and the reason he's doing this is in order that the Yisomim will respect her. Since she controls the money, they will respect her. And I will say halacha number 3, idach tamarav, manali biyadecha, teneu leploni v'mamad shlashtan, that if I say to Reuven, you owe me $1,000, Tineu Leploni, do me a favor, don't pay me back, just give it to Shimon. And I say this in the presence of 3 people. Shimon acquires ultimately again the $1,000. And Abba say, even though Shimon has not yet done Mashiach, even though Shimon has not yet has taken possession of the money, it's what we call, he's able to become it b'ma'amad shlashta. So Abba say, these are 3 things that are all rabbinic in nature, but the way that the rabbis kind of instituted it was in the model of a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, in that even though, again, it doesn't necessarily appear to be totally logical, Chazal instituted that it works. Good. Said the Mishnah. What's another fascinating cases? So brothers who are partners. I will say, what does it mean brothers who are partners? It means brothers are always partners in an estate. Father dies. By definition, they are automatic shutfin. So the brothers who were shutfin, I will say one of them fell into a job. Now we will discuss exactly what does it mean one of them fell into a job. Nafala emtza. I will say any wages or any profits that the brother generates from this job are shared by all the members of the estate. And obviously, this doesn't mean just a regular job, because if Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are brothers, they inherit, and Reuven, finishes school and gets a job, it doesn't make sense to say that his earnings are shared by the estate, those his earnings. So we'll discuss the parameters of what the Mishnah's case are. Chalav and Israpa, Israel Mishalasma. We'll say if one of the brothers becomes sick, right, then ultimately again he's obligated to go ahead and pay for his own healing. He's obligated to pay for his own medical bills, and he can't take estate money to pay for his medical bills. Says the Gemara, Tana, Hai Umnus. So we'll say when we say that if one of the brothers gets a job, right, and even the lashon of nafala umnus is an interesting one. He fell into a job that those wages that he gets, the income that he gets, is split between the entire estate. So the Gemara says, Hai umnus lo umnus hamelech. we'll say this is talking about where he goes to go ahead and work for the king. I will say, if you take a look back at the top Rashbam, it's actually the Rashbam in the Mishnah, where it says, the first line, Achin Ashot ben Shnach al ben Umnus HaMelech, Shemachmas Aviv Nafal Umnuzu, Sheki Minag HaMelech Ma'amin Mibayis Zu, Mochas Chodesh Echad, Umibayis Zu Chodesh Echad. So we'll say, the way it used to work was the following. They used to have a rotating tax collector system. And what happens? Each estate, each family estate, would be obligated to go ahead and take a month of tax collection. So the idea is you'd have one of the members of the family who would act as the tax collector on behalf of the king. So we'll say, so the idea is the following. This type of position is nothing to do with the strengths or the weaknesses of the individual. In other words, it's a function of a rotation. Right? It's a rotation. So because of say it's a function of a rotation, in other words, it's a function of being a member of this estate. Therefore, when one of the brothers does that job, what happens to the wages? The wages is shared by the estate because the job is related to his relationship to the estate and nothing to do with him really as an individual. V'haraya, if let's say it was Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and it was Reuven's turn to be the tax collector, and Reuven got sick, what would happen? Shimon goes out. In other words, it's just another member of the family who then goes out ultimately to go out and do the job. So says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanon, Hai Unus Lamelech, Tan Rabbanon, Echad min Achin, Sheminuhu Gabai o Plumustus. If one of the brothers was appointed as the Gabai, we'll say, so the Gabai ultimately again is the tax collector, o Plumustus. The Rashban says, Shoter, or one of the enforcers, one of the police officers. And what's the halacha? If the brother was appointed to this position because of his brothers, which is another way of saying he wasn't appointed because of any specific strengths or abilities. He was just appointed because every family takes its rotation. Then what? Then la'achin. Then I will say any money he gets paid ultimately goes into the pot of the estate and is shared by all of the brothers. But let's say again, if the brother was hired, I will say because of his own personal abilities. He was hired because of his own personal abilities, his own personal skills. Then what? Le'atzmo. Then he gets to keep the wages himself. Because I don't understand. If he's only hired because he's a brother, right? If he's only hired because he's a member of the estate, then of course it's obvious that the wages are shared by the estate. The following. What's the case? The case is where, yes, the brother was hired because he is a member of the estate. But it happens to be Reuven, who's the brother who's not going to do this work. Charif We'll say Charif means what? He's sharper than his brothers. Happens to be, he's a better businessman than his brothers. What I've thought, I might have thought that at the end of the day, maybe it's because of his sharpness, of his business acumen, that he was appointed. Kamash will no. Kamash will say that if we see that it's a familial rotation or an estate rotation, and every family has to serve its time, being the tax collector or being the officer, so the Maisa again we attribute his selection not to his personal qualities, but rather again to his being a member of this particular family. And therefore again any wages that he generates are split by the entire family. Tarabanan. Lilmot Torah or Lilmot Umnus. Supposed to listen to this. Let's say one of the brothers took a draw from the estate. I was supposed to say, let's say for argument's sake, we know how much money there is in the estate, we know how many brothers there are, so we know exactly how much every brother is entitled to. So one of the brothers, prior to the division of the estate, decides to draw money from the estate. Now we'll discuss the appropriateness of that, but that's what he's doing. So he draws money from the estate. He takes 200 zuz from the estate in order to what? Lilmot Torah or Lilmot Umnus. Rabbi said to go to yeshiva or to go to college, whatever he does, he's taking the money, taking the money to learn. What happens? Yicholin ha'achin lomar lo, imata etzleni yesh l'cha mazono. So the brothers can say, listen, if you live at home, we will support you from the estate. Im einata etzlenu, if you do not live at home, Ein lecha mezonos. So you both say, remember, when the father dies and leaves the estate, there are two things that happen, right? Number one, the estate gets divided and all the brothers get a portion. We'll say, prior to the division of the estate, the brothers have the ability to draw on estate money just to support themselves day to day. And whatever they take, and then ultimately the chalukah is based on whatever's left in the estate. So now one of the brothers took his draw and went out to learn a trade, whatever he went to do. So the other brothers say, listen, you don't get money from Mazonos unless you're living at home. Right? If you're home, then you get money from Mazonos. If you're not home, you don't get money from Mazonos. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. I don't understand why not. Meaning it's easy enough to calculate out what his support would be worth. So what does it matter if he gets that at home or if he gets that somewhere else? To which the Gemara says, his supports the position of Rav Huna. Because what does Rav Huna say? The Rav Huna, birchas habayis beruba. We'll say that the bracha of a home, right? Literally, the bracha, the bounty of a home is dependent on the number of residents. Now what does that mean? Take a look at the Rashbam. Birchas habayis beruba, shilahaya dar iman, haya habayis misparich biglalo. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the Rashbam understands this on a more, almost like esoteric way. That the more people living in a home, the more shefa, the more bounty HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to that home. In other words, there's perhaps the more people, the more collective zchuyos you have in a home, the more collective merit you have in a home, and therefore, by definition, the more bracha you have there. Therefore, if one of the brothers moves out, he's depriving the rest of them of the collective merit, and therefore, again, he does not get mizonos. Now the truth is, the Gemara says, you will see later on that the second explanation I will say to this is a much more simple, well, I guess what we'll call economies of scale. That Lamaisa, again, supporting everyone under one roof is cheaper than supporting multiple siblings in multiple locations. If another brother is living somewhere else, I will say, number one, what does he have? He has rent. Number two, he's got electricity, or at least in the times of the Gemara, he's got oil and wicks. Number three, I will say, it's different when you have to prepare food for one person versus preparing food for a larger group. So the idea is over here is that there are economies of scale at play when all the brothers are being supported under one roof versus, again, the brothers being supported at multiple locations. So therefore, what the brothers essentially are timing to the brother who moved out is, look, you know what, if you live with us, support is going to cost X. But now that you're living on your own, support is going to cost X plus Y. We're not paying for that. To which the Gemara says, but I understand, I will say, if that's the case, then fine. Give him the support that he would have been entitled to had he been home. In other words, figure out what that amount is. If he was living at home, this is the amount of food he would have consumed. This is the amount of electricity he would have consumed. This is the amount. Figure out what the cost is and just give him that. You're right. That we would give him. In other words, that what we give him, in other words, so he can't claim full support when living away from home. But if somehow we reach the calculation as to what he would have gotten had he lived at home, then Lamais, again, he would be entitled to that amount. Good. If the brother becomes sick, he becomes ill. So ultimately, again, he can't take estate money to heal his illness. He has to pay for that himself. Well, so that's only true if he got sick because of his own negligence. In other words, if he was negligent and got sick, then he has to pay for his own medical care. However, again, about ba'ones, nisrape mina emsa. I will say if at the end of the day he got sick because of some type of extenuating circumstance, then what? He is able to be healed from the estate money. So, we'll say, what's the case of where a person gets sick because of negligence? Kid Rabbi Chanina. We'll say this is in accordance with the Rabbi Chanina. I will say everything is in the hands of heavens. Chutz mitzanim pachim. We'll say with the exception of cold drafts. Cold drafts, right? So what does this mean? Cold, not a reference to beer, right? But a reference, mamish, to a cold wind, to getting sick by going outside and not being properly clothed. So the Gemara says, Shneimar sanim pachim b'derech ikesh shomer nafsho yirchak mehem. I was like, the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Mishlei. Sanim pachim, literally again, cold winds b'derech ikesh ultimately are found by those who do not maintain the proper path. Shomer nafsho, he who watches his soul yirchak mehem. So we'll say the idea is that there are certain forms of illness that can be avoided if you're negligent and you don't wear a winter coat outside and you catch a cold. That's called pshia. If you get sick because of pshia, then what? That's your own problem. The estate is not obligated to pay for that. But if a person gets sick because there's just extenuating circumstances, then Eina Chinami, that illness can be cured from estate money. So we don't have time for it now, but I'll just point out a really very interesting machlokes over here between the Rashbam and Tosfos. We'll take a look at it later on. Says the Mishnah, I have to go back there. Ha'achin sha'asu miktasan shoshvinos b'chaye ha'av. So let's listen to this case. Let's say shoshvinos was the following. We loosely translate shoshvinos as groomsmen. But understand what it meant. Sometimes the Mishnah was something very different, which is that if I have a chaver, my chaver is getting married, so there was an understanding, I'm going to go to the chassan, I'm going to be misameach with him, but here's the kunz of shoshvinin. There was an expectation that I'm giving him a significant gift. I'm giving a significant gift. That's part of shoshvinus. But shoshvinus always comes with an automatic reciprocity. So if I am the shoshvinin, if I'm the groomsman, if I am a groomsman for Ruvain and I bring him a gift, there is an expectation of reciprocity that when I get married, Ruvain is going to do the same thing. And I will say this wasn't expected reciprocity. We're actually going to see it's quite even possible. It might even be a legally enforceable reciprocity, which is quite amazing. That's called shoshvinus. So we'll say if you have some of the brothers. So let's say Reuven and Shimon. And what happens? Reuven and Shimon were shoshvinim. They were groomsmen for a friend of theirs when their father was alive. So what's the halacha? Chazra shoshvinus chazra li emsa. We'll say what this is talking about over here is that when they were alive, when the father was alive, so let's say father gave Reuven and Shimon the money, the asset, the property, ultimately to go ahead and give to their friend who was getting married. Father dies. Now Reuven and Shimon are getting married. That friend those friends are now reciprocating the gifts. What happens to those gifts? Those gifts are supposed to go into la emsa. They go ultimately into the pot. They go into the estate property. Shoshvinos nigvis bebezdin. Because they will say shoshvinos literally is collectible in bezdin. Again, we'll see exactly what this means. But the point the Gemara Mishnah seems to be making over here is like shoshvinos is looked at like a debt that is owed to the estate, and therefore again it goes into the pot. Nigves hasholech lachaver kadiyam kadeshemen. If somebody sends me a gift, right? Somebody sends me a gift. Ultimately, again, that gift is just considered to be a matana, and therefore, again, because it's a matana, it can't be collected in a bezin. We'll say what exactly the Mishnah is saying. We'll have to see. So says the Gemara, or mini. Tomorrow is the kasha. Shalach lo aviv shoshvinos. So we'll say if ultimately, again, the father sent shoshvinos. Look at the Rashbam. Kilomar, we're meaning shalach lo avin aviv shoshvinos. Kilomar, shalach al yodo uletzarcho shuhu yochal v'yismach imo. Dalakama maflik bein shalach aviv shoshvinos l'shalach lo aviv shoshvinos. Let's listen to this. So what's the case over here? So the father goes ahead, and it appears right now, based on this case, is that let's say again, Yaakov is the father. His son's Reuven's friend is getting married. So Yaakov sends with Reuven shoshvinos. He sends him a gift for his friend who's getting married. Kishi chozeres. Ultimately, again, when the gift comes back, in other words, we'll say, when now Reuven gets married, and what? And now his friend who got married is giving him back a gift. Chozeres lo. We'll say the Mishnah seems to be saying that what? That the gift goes back to who? The gift goes back to Reuven and not to the estate. Nishtalcha le'aviv shoshvinos. I will say if ultimately again, when the father, let's say, and we'll have to see what this case means, but let's say there was shoshvinos sent to the father. Let's say the father was getting married, and someone sent shoshvinos to the father. Kishi chozeres. We'll say, listen to this case. Let's say in this case again, Yaakov the father was getting remarried, so somebody sent him shoshvinos. Then what happens? The person who sent him is getting married. The person who sent it is getting married. But in the interim, Yaakov died. So now what happens? What happens to the obligation to send the shoshvinos on behalf of the father? Kishi chozeres mina emsa. The estate is obligated to go ahead and what? Give back that shoshvinos. So we'll stop over here. What the Bryce seems to be saying is the following: that when a father gives his son money or a gift for shoshvinos, and the father sends it through that son, Yaakov gives money to Reuven to bring a shoshvinos gift to his friend. When Reuven gets married, Reuven gets to keep that gift, which I will say contradicts our Mishnah. Yet the Mishnah says, if let's say somebody went ahead and the father was getting remarried, Yaakov was getting remarried, and then what happens? And then after Yaakov dies after he's remarried, and then the person who sent him the gift is now getting married, the estate is obligated to take care of the shoshvinos on behalf of Yaakov. So we'll say the first statement is a contradiction. The second statement is a new case. The reconciliation of Mir Hashem tomorrow. Shkoyach. We'll have to see about the start time. All right. Sorry. Homework.